That's quite the pronouncement that you make about President Trump being able to, kind of pierce through this whole scam once and for all. Can you walk us through what you mean by it?
Yes. Okay. Trump 1.0, he gets elected in 2016. The entire climate change movement, from the World Economic Forum to the United Nations, Al Gore, the whole Green New Deal infrastructure here in the United States, all were basically Donald Trump is like a kidney stone. It's going to hurt a little bit, but we'll pass him through the system and we're going to continue with no problem. They had one problem. Donald Trump came in and did a lot of reversals, but it was coming back from Obama. So he went yin yang with Trump, and then Biden comes in and goes the other way. And now Trump's back. The reason this is different than Trump's first term is because we've had now 8 years of the global environmental climate change movement with the UN Paris Agreement. And they've tried everything from solar and wind mandates to banning gas-powered cars to all of the net zero rules and regulations, the intentional collapse of our energy rationing, the intentional collapse of food production going after the Netherlands farmers with the net zero policies and all the other farmers in Europe, to the point where they rebelled and sprayed manure on EU headquarters, and they halted the Green Deal in Europe last summer because of the EU elections. And then they also were coming after our freedom of movement, France banning short-haul flights, and CNN proposing carbon passports and all the sustainable aviation nonsense. All of this happened. We saw the Ukraine war and the effect it had on Europe. They were caught completely unprepared, and they have to rely now on the Middle East. They have to rely on Russia. They have to rely on all the green energy they had wasn't working. We now know that green energy is more expensive. It's not green. It takes 500,000 pounds to dig up the earth to make one EV battery. We know that it takes tons and tons of non-recyclable plastic, steel, concrete to make wind turbines, and they run on oil. They're horrible to recycle. They don't produce any measurable energy. They're under 14% globally and in the U.S., despite all the trillions and hundreds of billions in subsidies and mandates. So when Donald Trump comes around 2.0, the whole world is like ready to walk away from this, and he comes in with like a pin and just pop. And that is why I say this may be the most consequential presidency, exceeding that of even Ronald Reagan, because he's the right man at the right time, and he understands one thing. And you opened the show with it, Kara, that framing and that narrative. It's not like he's like, well, of course, climate's a problem. We need a solution. And he's just like, it's a scam. And that resonates. And what that's going to cause, we've already seen what I was in Baku, Azerbaijan, 23 hours of nonstop travel from Washington, D.C. to Baku to go to that stupid UN COP29 climate summit. We know that Donald Trump picked up the phone, talked to Milei, the Argentinian leader, and he pulled out his entire delegation from the UN climate summit. We know the French Foreign Environmental Ministry didn't even bother to attend. We know that the host country said oil was a gift from God. We know there was massive infighting. I was able to witness firsthand at a UN summit what I call the Trump effect. He was imploding the entire summit to the point where they want to ban countries who don't support the narrative, which means they're going to end up completely collapsing once they start banning countries. So my point being, Donald Trump understands it's the power of the message and narrative. And he's also, of course, gone through everything from offshore wind to solar. He's going after the Inflation Reduction Act. We need the Republican Congress to follow up on that. And of course, he's pulled us out of the UN Paris. We now have the possibility of Hungary, Poland, Argentina, what I call a Clegxit, a climate exit from this UN Paris Agreement. Again, these are significantly consequential because it's going to be very hard for them to recover from this in 4 or 8 years, because it's kind of like the defund the police. It was a theory, academics for decades. Oh, if you defund the police, the cities will be safer. Well, guess what? They actually got to try it, a real world experiment. And it was a disaster. Within a year, Joe Biden's begging, refund the police at his State of the Union. Same thing with climate. It was a theory for decades. They finally got to implement their net zero Green New Deal, and it was a disaster everywhere it was tried, from Sri Lanka through Europe, through all of Australia and Canada, and the people are rejecting it. So that's why I say he's the most consequential president. This is unprecedented, and he's doing it with such clarity of message. And as a communications guy, that's what really appeals to me.